Cast. My name is Taylor Hart. I'm your host from Respect My Region, and today I'm sitting down with Katie Enright of Lavinia. Is that the right
Lavinia.
pronunciation? Lavinia. I was going back and forth between those two pronunciations. Um, but before we get started, I just want to give a huge shout out to the Biden administration today because they have announced that they are pardoning thousands and thousands of prior simple marijuana possession convictions in the past. And so that is just stellar news to hear for the morning. I literally just finished writing and publishing an article on Respect My Region. Go check that out because they are working on, they're not decriminalizing it yet. But they are pardoning prior convictions and they're working to reschedule it. And Biden announced that this morning. So I just wanted to start off by saying that because that is super, super exciting news. But now let's go into that. Let's get into you because today is going to be a really exciting episode. I've talked to a lot of different people from a lot of different aspects of the industry now. But this is one direction that we haven't gone yet on this podcast that I'm really excited to talk about because I am very much so a sexual person and I am very much so a cannabis consumer. And so these two worlds come together beautifully and you said Lavinia, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to have to get that into my head because I always play around with different things. I study a lot of languages, so the way that
Oh,
words are said
cool.
and stuff is really fascinating to me. So yeah, let's talk about that and discuss that. Let's talk about you to start with, though. Let's just talk about who you are and your relationship with the plant and kind of just your journey to coming into the industry today. So yeah,
Yeah.
let's start with that, your story.
Yeah. My story into cannabis is very different than most people's. I actually studied theology and did a discernment period and almost became a nun, which is not people's traditional path into cannabis.
Okay.
But thankfully, I didn't, and I was able to start this company, which is really exciting and really fun. But my journey into cannabis, I was actually training for my second marathon, and my first
Oh, wow.
marathon, I injured myself terribly. It was like a terrible process. I hurt my back, I hurt my knees. A marathon is very strenuous on your body, and so for my second marathon, I decided to incorporate recovery in my training. And I decided to incorporate cannabis because I'm a
Yeah.
huge believer in cannabis. I love cannabis. Cannabis balms and topicals really saved my life while training. Like, it's incredible. You put it on and like 2 minutes later, all of your pain is gone.
Literally, I use topicals daily. I absolutely love them.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It truly is amazing. Super effective. And so I was just making it from, I was using so much that I actually was making my own balms in my kitchen
Oh, wow.
because I was making so like large amounts, and I was doing tons of research about cannabis, and I read somewhere that you could use it to enhance your sexual experience, and I was like,
Yeah.
that's so interesting. I'd never heard this before. I never thought about it before.
Yeah.
And so I tried some of the balm that I made, and I was using coconut oil as my base for that balm, and I tried it and it was amazing in terms of the experience. But coconut oil and like as a sexual lubricant for me doesn't mix. It instantly gives
Okay.
me a yeast infection. It, can kill good
Ooh.
bacteria, which can cause
Yeah.
yeast to overgrow. And so I literally the next day went to a dispensary to buy a cannabis based product to enhance my sexual experience that was not coconut oil based, and I
Yeah.
literally couldn't find it. Like,
Mhm.
it didn't exist, right?
Yeah.
So I went to a sex store and I bought silicone-based lube because that's my favorite kind of lubricant. And I like made some in my kitchen and I just kind of like farted around. I didn't know what I was doing. I did like whole plant. I just threw everything in and I mixed it, and I did like a nut milk bag and squeezed it and prayed for the best. And it was amazing. It was such an intense, powerful orgasm. It was like the most intense orgasm I've ever had. I was like, holy cow, this is amazing. I'm still
Yeah.
not thinking this is a company or anything really
Right.
valuable besides something that I just kind of discovered for myself. And I was bartending at the time.
Yeah.
And I would bring some for like regulars or like my coworkers. And I would just like give it out to people just as like an act of love, right?
Yeah.
And one guy one time came into the bar and was like, hey, are you the weed lube girl? And I was like, I am. I'm the weed lube girl. And he's like, "Can I buy some of that?" And as soon as he said, "Can I buy some of that?" like something in my brain clicked and I was like, "Oh, this is a company." Like if people have had such a great experience that they've heard about it and it's
Yeah.
like something that's not readily available, it's like the underground weed lube world. I
Yeah.
was like, this needs to be a product that's out on the market.
That is amazing. What was the big shift that went from nun life or practicing to be a nun to cannabis, bartending, lube? Like, what was the big shift that happened to make that transition?
I mean, it's kind of like it's kind of uh a lot of little things that happen, right?
Hmm.
That's how change happens, and it happens one step at a time, or one shift at a time. And really, for me, when I decided not to become a nun, you take a vow of celibacy. So I
Right.
didn't know anything about sex, and I was very
Right.
intimidated by it and very insecure because at that age most of my friends were very sexually active.
Yeah.
And so I started taking webinars and tutorials about sex, like how to have oral
Interesting.
sex, anal sex, like how to prepare, what to do. And really gave me like a great knowledge about it, and to the point
Yeah.
that I felt super secure. I was able to kind of draw my own boundaries of what I wanted to do, what made me feel good. It was a really empowering experience. So I
Yeah.
think that that's kind of the shift too, is because all of a sudden I came into my own sexuality, which is really important for a product like this.
Yes, and really important just for women in general in societies that have just suppressed and told women that they're not allowed to basically be independent and empowered and be in control of their sexuality. Women have always been seen by men as, they just produce the babies and we're just, there for their pleasure. And so just being a woman in general and taking charge of that is like that. It makes me so happy and so proud. Everybody that I get to talk to who has taken that, because my parents raised me to be very independent and to be very in control of myself and be aware and be free in my sexuality, and I've just grown up like that, and not everybody has, obviously,
Mhm.
so to hear that story and to hear your journey through it, it makes me happy to hear. I love hearing stories like that. So congratulations on that, and
Thanks.
and coming into who you are, because I think that is truly so important.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So does religion then still play a part in your day-to-day life at all, or
Yeah, for sure. That's the thing, is that I mean, I think that no, it doesn't matter what religion you are. God wants you to have great sexual experiences and great orgasms. Like I think that we kind of have this misnomer that they're separate, and they're not at all, in my
right?
opinion.
100%, yeah. I'm not like religious in the, I guess, in the normal sense, the average sense of like going to church or like whatever that is. But I am definitely like a spiritual person, and have found a lot of spirituality in using cannabis as well. Do you find that you feel any of that like kind of spirituality come into play, or have felt any of that throughout your journey
Oh,
as
absolutely. Yeah,
okay.
absolutely. Especially with psychedelics, especially with
Yeah.
mushrooms, psilocybin really has a deep. I mean, it really does connect you to the earth and God, and it gives you such a broader sense of the
Yeah.
world that we're living in. And yeah, absolutely. I really love it. I love cannabis too for creativity. I just feel like your mind explodes with
Yeah.
different thoughts. And there's so many times that either I'm very, if I take like a macro dose of psilocybin
Yeah.
or some cannabis or whatever, there's so many times that I'm like, this is brilliant. I gotta write this down. I gotta write this down. This is great. This is great. And then the next day I'm like, what was it again? That was so brilliant.
100%. I will definitely admit that plenty of my work, plenty of my writing, plenty, honestly, episodes of my other podcast as well, I have been fully entranced in some sort of psychedelic high, or just on a whole nother plane after smoking. Like my other podcast, I smoke an entire blunt, rolled with like an entire eighth of weed to the face. And so usually just that blunt alone gets me to that level to where I'm like, oh my
Wow.
God, like creative ideas out the yin yang. But I also have incorporated mushrooms into my day to day as well in microdosing. And I'm seeing just such a tremendously different experience in my own body as well. And then when I take that into sexual experience as well, I feel like I'm more grounded. I feel like I'm more in control of what I'm doing and knowing what I like as well. And like knowing when to express that it might not be like I'm feeling uncomfortable
Mm-hmm.
or, you know, like those types of things. So it's definitely opened me up in the communication aspect of that as well. And I think that is really important for people to start exploring as well with so many women that I know that have dealt with, you know, either being raped or molested or some sort of sexual abuse in their life. I personally have dealt with some of that as well. And psychedelics I found and cannabis have helped open me up and realize that those things weren't my fault and that it's okay to move on and be in charge of your own sexuality too. So anybody out there listening, cannabis and psychedelics are definitely a route to go to be able to open yourself up and get in touch with yourself, pun intended, better in that sexual aspect. So yeah, amazing journey to hear that you have taken and to get to this point. So before formulating your own lube, did you ever have any experience in like innovating different products or coming up with different things or any sort of creativity in that aspect?
Yes. So mixology is actually like
Oh,
how I studied acting and directing, and so that's kind of my past careers, and kind of still a little bit to, uh, still I still dabble in that
totally.
world. But so my survival job was always bartending,
Uh,
and initially when I started, it was really just to make money, and I didn't really enjoy it, and it was kind of like I wasn't really in love and passionate about it. But as I kind of grew further in my career, I realized that it's genuinely like cooking, and
mhm.
that it's like a little bit measurement of this and this, and if you get just the right measurement, it's an amazing cocktail, right? And I started
Right.
learning about formulations, and I started learning about like how to craft things, and I became really passionate about mixology. Like I
Yeah.
just loved it. It would be like every day or every night I would challenge myself with like what the current fruits or vegetables that are available and the herbs that we have. And the first week that we were in quarantine, I actually quarantined with my boyfriend and his family, and we like were make cocktails, but with only things that we had available in the house. So like we
That
had to
is
use
so cool.
only things that were available. So I was like making peppercini juice with whiskey and dill. I mean, that drink was kind of gross, but it was really fun. And so I think that that's kind of how I started, as I was really passionate about mixology and formulation from that aspect. And then actually I really loved, so I've always been kind of an athlete, and I say that loosely because I've never been like professional or made money or anything,
Right.
but I've always enjoyed athletic things. And so for me, smoking is really hard because, it's just for my lungs. Like I cough, and it's so embarrassing, and I get so embarrassed that I'm the girl that's like,
Yeah.
it's like, no, it's just not a cute look for anyone. So I traditionally actually don't smoke that much. I normally do
Yeah.
like edibles or mostly edibles or tinctures.
Totally.
But it's really funny because like I started making cocktails that had THC, and
Yeah.
that's initially how I thought I was going to even enter the cannabis market. Like, if I ever thought I would be in the industry, because at that time, this is maybe 3 or 4 years ago, there
Mm.
weren't really a lot of beverages available. Like, can
Right.
hadn't really hit the scene. There just wasn't really an alternative way to consume cannabis. And so I would just make cocktails. I'd make margaritas, and then I'd put THC in.
Yum.
And so it was kind of interesting though, because like you could really only have one, because it was like,
Right.
because I was making it with alcohol, which is very illegal. You can't sell alcohol in a dispensary, you can't consume alcohol in a dispensary, you can't, I mean, they have like 4 different laws that are like
Right.
ironclad that this will never actually be a thing that happens. But I was making like margaritas with THC, and Yeah, so anyways, so that's kind of how I started, and that's how I started formulation and stuff like that. And so I really enjoy the process of like R&D and tincturing and figuring out, we're our whole goal of our company is to enhance people's sex life through cannabis. And
Right.
so we launched with a lubricant, and then we're working on some anal sex products. And so it's so fun because we're in the same process where we're like tincturing it to like just kind of tinkering with it to get it just perfect.
Right.
It's really fun.
Yeah. So then let's dive into the lube and what it goes into it and like how it's formulated and all of that. Because we have a couple, like I'm a bartender right now at my store. We have a couple on the shelf. And so I've tried my hand and used them before. But one of them just didn't sit right with me and wasn't the greatest. And the other one was fine, but it didn't do anything necessarily that I felt was like, different than any other kind of lube.
Hmm.
So I have been just like not really finding the right products. So a couple of the things that yours is a little bit different. So let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Silicone based, you said that was your favorite, correct?
Yeah, so there's basically kind of three different types of lube. There's water-based, silicone-based, and oil-based. Oil-based is not condom compatible, so we kind of nixed that right away,
Okay.
just because we wanted a product that was condom compatible. And then water-based is great, but the problem is you have to use nanotechnology in order to get the cannabis to emulsify in it, and it tastes really bad. And so we did. Dr. Paul Lassar does all of our formulations. I call him the Walter White of weed. He's amazing. We did about 25 different formulations. We did R&D and everything. I really wanted to do like cast a wide net and
Mm,
have really strong decisions of like why we did do this, why we didn't do this, right?
yeah.
And so with the nano, the onset time was lickety split, like it was so quick. But the problem is it tasted so bad, and some people in our testing group were like, we actually stopped having like my boyfriend went down on me, and then actually we stopped having sex, and he had to brush his teeth, and then we didn't continue our sexual experience because it tasted so
Oh
so I was like, that's not what we want. So we were
no.
like, okay, we're either gonna wait till the technology catches up, or we'll figure something out, because there are certain things with nano, like if it's an edible, you can just add sugars to it, or do like
Right.
blockers, like bitter blockers or something like that, so the taste isn't quite as bad. But with the sexual product, like we didn't want to add sugar, obviously, for obvious reasons. And I personally really love silicone, because silicone is great for both vaginal and anal use. And to me, it feels really silky. Like it feels really silky, really smooth, really soft. The thing to know about the product is, cannabis is a vasodilator, which basically means, when you smoke weed and your eyes turn red, like the actual size of the blood vessel is increasing, and it's causing the blood flow to increase. And the
Right.
same thing happens when you apply it topically below the belt, which is amazing, right?
Yeah.
Like that's exactly how it works. But there is an onset time of 15 minutes to a half hour that's really important to know about, because if you don't leave it on long enough, it's just like an edible. Like it needs that time for you to get high. It needs that
Right.
time to increase the blood flow. And if you don't know about it, you could just apply the lubricant, go to town, and be like, I didn't experience anything. And it's like, well, it really does need that time to increase the blood flow.
For sure. And then after that, how long lasting is the lubricant for you? Because if you're waiting that long beforehand, do you need to apply more,
I
or are
always
you still going to
do.
be?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, you should be fine without it, but I always do, just because I like it, really, because it depends too on if you're in a solo session, or if you're with a partner. And if you're in a solo session, it depends on if you're constantly touching yourself, and it's like you've incorporated that as part of your foreplay, then you're
Mm.
still probably very lubricated. If you just kind of put it on and sit, and like do other things, like sometimes I'll just put it on and then like finish emails. If just whatever, then I typically reapply as well.
Interesting kind of foreplay that you give yourself, but okay.
Well, it's fun because like this is my job, right? So it's like
Right.
I gotta fit everything in. But yeah, but it's very personal. Like you can kind of feel down there, and and just apply as needed for
As
you.
necessary.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
So when it comes to the cannabinoid content in there, what is the ratio of like CBD to THC that you're using in there?
So we did everything in our R&D. We did
Yeah.
everything. We did all CBD. We did all THC. We did high CBD, low THC, high THC, low CBD. And what we found was the best formulation. There's actually a vibrator called the Lioness that has sensors on the side that records the pulsing of the vaginal walls during a sexual experience. So for the first time ever, we actually have like data. So we can say like, oh, this sexual experience had 4 orgasms and was really intense. This sexual experience had one and was not so good, right? And so like we were able to actually use that in our formulation strategy. And we found that the most orgasmic formula was 2 to 1, THC being more.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
That is really cool. I know that you had this little graphic. I can go ahead and share this
Yeah. So
really
that's
quick.
that's
Let's
exactly
share this.
that's
Break
the
this
data
down
from the
for us
lioness.
here.
Yeah, so that's the data from the lioness. So the green you can see is just a water-based lubricant. That's actually a great orgasm. Like 2 orgasms were achieved during that time. There's nothing wrong with that orgasm. It was great. But you can
Oh,
see with the oh.hi cannabis lubes how it just increases the pulsing of the vaginal walls so much more. And
that
four
is insane.
orgasms were achieved. Yeah, there's like 2 times that it gets to be 100.
Yeah. That is insane to see. So you can visually see the difference that it is making, which I mean, I know a lot of people, they're skeptical about certain things. Like, is it just marketing or, is it actually data driven? So that's really incredible to see just the difference that you are seeing here. And, studying sex, like, that's a hard thing to to do, because everybody's a little bit different and having their own personal experiences. So it's really cool to see kind of like a data set like that that shows the difference. So 2 to 1 THC to CBD is that magic number that you found. Now, did you try like full spectrum versus the distillate oils? And did you see any difference between the two?
We did distillate though because we really wanted it. So that was, Dr. Paul Lassard was the one that really kind of led us in the direction of distillate. And part of it is like terpenes. Like we wanted to make sure that we didn't know like vaginally how terpenes would kind of interact, and so we really wanted
Totally.
to use a distillate just because it was a little bit more pure.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. When you're talking about using this, internally or, on the surface level, that is something that has yet to really, and we're still learning about terpenes and still studying what their effects are. And the whole entourage effect, just in general, of cannabis is still kind of being you know thought about and researched and figured out, because as of lately they're like, well, terpenes don't actually connect to your receptors or anything like that, so they're seeing it more as like a more so of an aromatherapy type thing. So that would make sense in this case to where you would want to go to more so just distillates, because you don't have a lot of those other variables or those other compounds coming into play. So that makes great sense. And so I was looking as well, and y'all have a partnership with Dr. Christina Collins.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask about that and how that partnership came to be, and how that's going.
Dr. Christina Collins is like the most amazing woman ever. She is a board certified dermatologist. She's Harvard trained. She is located in Texas, and she is has like she has a what am I trying to say? Like a doctor's office there,
Like a
a
practice up there.
dermatology doctor's
Yeah.
office, like a practice there, exactly.
Yeah.
And she actually, I was introduced to her because she was coming out with a skincare line, and one of her products was a vulva moisturizer. So,
Oh,
and it had CBD in it, hemp-based CBD, because she's in Texas. And
right.
it was so fascinating because we just started talking, and we have products that are not competitive but compatible, and so we just kind of started off as friends and had a few meetings just talking about each of our own businesses and how it's going. And she actually very recently launched her skincare line, which I'm very excited. It's called Love Foy. If you want to check it out on Instagram.
I
And
probably
it has like
will.
a vulva moisturizer, which is great for daily use. And so I was just really, when I met her, I was really inspired by how honest she was, how open she was, how she's a really great communicator. She's like just a woman's health advocate.
Yeah.
She's really amazing. She's just like, I couldn't have asked for a better partnership, and it was just one of those things that just kind of like, oh, you guys should meet each other. You're doing something very similar, and so now she kind of goes through, and she's the one who's actually able to explain like why it works and why what happens in the body, and
Yeah.
it's like you were saying, people just could think that it's hogwash or whatever, and it's like having a
Right.
doctor say like, no, 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 it's going to increase your blood flow, and when you have increased blood flow, that's how you have increased pleasure. It's like, oh, that makes
Yes.
sense.
Yes. And so when like we've been talking about like measuring like the intensity of this orgasm, but when it comes to actually like researching that, like what goes into like figuring that out? Because like obviously like most people that's a very intimate kind of scenario. So like how do you even quantify like how like the measure like intensity of an orgasm? Like how do you even measure that?
There's so many different factors that go into pleasure, a sexual experience, a sexual situation, right? If your dog barks at just the wrong moment where you're right about to have an orgasm, right? Like
Right.
if the neighbor, if anything that can kind of come in and throw a wrench in your situation, right? And
Right.
so it's very interesting for us, for like the R&D aspect is so interesting and so funny, because I was showing someone the graph and the time was like noon, and they were like,
Yeah.
why were you jacking it at noon? And I was like, this is my job. This is working hours. um,
Right.
but it is kind of hard to quantify like one orgasm from another, and that's why having the data is so important, right? Because it literally shows like what's happening in your vaginal walls and like how
Right.
the product is responding to it, which is
Yeah.
really 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 important to see. And
Yeah.
also, so we also have like a beta testing group. So if anyone wants to be in the group, please like DM me. I would love more candidates, especially for the anal
Yeah.
sex product that we're developing. Love it. But basically, we just ask that the people, like, if it's going to be a sexual situation with a partner, that they've had sex with that partner before, because
Mhm.
like like at least 10 times, because first few times situation, there's also too many variables that
Totally.
come into play, and we just get a lot of feedback, and then we average out the feedback, and then from there, like when we're doing our formulation stage, then we get feedback, then we do another round of formulation, then we get feedback, then we do another round of formulation, then we get feedback, and we do it
Yeah.
all the way up until we found like where everyone that's tried the new formula is like, yes,
That's
and that's
incredible
kind of how
though.
we know
Yeah.
when it's good to go.
I mean, hey, that's a great, if you get a nice resounding yes, we had a big O. That's a good measure, I would say. So, well, that kind of, you kind of mentioned a little bit about the anal sex products that you're working on towards.
Hmm.
So that was one of my like final questions and wrap up questions was, since you've seen such quick success with the lube, will we see product line expand just as quickly, or are you guys going to spend just as much time dedicated to the R&D and figuring out the products and then slowly outrolling maybe a larger line of products?
Yeah, I think, we take, like I said, for the lube, we took about a year and a half of R&D. We
Hmm.
learned a lot. We changed a lot. We've been for the anal sex products in R&D for probably about 8 months now.
Okay.
Um, so we've been in R&D for a bit. The thing about cannabis is, as we know, relatively new in terms of being legal and studied. And
Yes.
there is absolutely no data on anal sex and cannabis. So we are kind of leading the way in terms of
Yeah.
data, specifically on anal sex and cannabis, which has been so fascinating, because I've been able
Yeah.
to work with Dr. Christina Collins and Dr. Paul Lassard to kind of have them both come together and understand what's happening and why it's happening, and like getting the specific effects that we're desiring. And to be honest with you, it does break the blood barrier, so it does kind of give you an all over body high, which feels insane and amazing. So it's kind of interesting, because even if you're not planning on having anal sex, if you're comfortable inserting it anally and consuming cannabis that way, it's
Yeah.
actually a really insane experience. It's a really It's really, it's kind of my new favorite way to consume, to be honest.
That is so funny because honestly, at Respect My Region, we always joke about and have this culture of saying that we're going to boof everything. Um, but most products are not too great to boof, which is sticking it up into the anal cavity. But this sounds like the one product that we would be like,
It's designed
absolutely.
specifically to do it. And what's so cool is you get an actual head high within like 4 to 5 minutes. Like it's
That's
insane.
insane.
You get high very quickly from it. So it's like if you're not, I mean, if you smoke, you get high pretty quickly too. But if you're not a smoker,
Right. Yeah. The
you can be an anal
alternative.
shooter.
Well, I am so excited to see how that product plays out and comes into the market because I really think, especially with the timeline that you're operating on right now, too, like I said at the beginning of this, they're working on rescheduling it on the federal level. So, we're going to see a whole new national market come into play. And with that, more acceptance from people who haven't ever used any cannabis products or anything like that, and more people who would be users like yourself that aren't just smoking all the time and are using alternative methods as well. I think we're going to start to see a huge rise in that kind of consumer base. And so products like this are going to be so important for those types of people because, they're not having to smoke a joint beforehand or something like that, which comes with a host of other kind of side effects to it too that aren't necessarily the best for when you're having sex, quite honestly. As somebody who smokes all day, every day, pretty much, I can tell you that sometimes smoking is not the answer before you have sex because sometimes it is honestly turns you down instead of turning you up. So yes, I was thrilled to sit down and be able to have this conversation with you because this is something that not a lot of people are honestly open to speak about as well. I've had plenty of people come into my store and be like, "Do you have
Yeah.
do you have a and they won't even like say it kind of a thing." And so I have spent many, many years openly talking about this with people, and to meet somebody like yourself and talk to you and you formulated this product all from the passion of your own heart, like it fills me with joy. So thank you so much, Katie, for sitting down and talking with me today. Do you have anything that you want to wrap up this conversation? Any last minute thing that you want to leave the people with, or where they can go just to check you out and see more about you?
Yeah, for sure. So we're currently only available in the state of California, in dispensaries in the state of California. Hopefully, federally, something will happen and that will change
Yeah.
change the game, or we'll expand to another state as well.
Yeah.
But you can check us out, oh.lavinia.com, OHLAVINIA.com. Check us out on Instagram too, oh.lavinia. My Instagram is _Katie _Enright _. And if you want to be in our beta testing group, we would love that. We love feedback. And, our whole goal of our company is to enhance people's sex life through cannabis. So all of the products that we're currently working on are designed to do exclusively just that.
That is amazing. Again, thank you so much. I hope this isn't the last time that we get to talk and connect, and hopefully we get to connect further. I know Respect My Region is always down with strong women, especially in both of these industries. So yes, thank you again, and I appreciate everybody tuning in and watching as well every week for the Higher Women podcast. We are in, I don't even know what week it is now of our North American Weed Tour. But we still have a couple more months until December 15th of the North American Weed Tour. So check out all of our different podcasts, all of the different articles we're running on the website. We're talking about cannabis literally in every aspect, everywhere across the entire, honestly, across the whole world right now. So tune in with us and tune in with Lavinia and everything that you're doing as well, Katie. And I will be back next week for another episode of the Higher Women podcast. But for now, we will say goodbye and see y'all next week. So,
Bye. Thank you so much for having me.
yes, of course. Thank you for joining us. And thank y'all for watching as well. Have